Most gardeners with dead, compacted soil do one of two things. They haul in bags of expensive amendment at $15 a piece, or they give up on the bed entirely. I did both for years. Then I dug up a Depression era agriculture bulletin that recommended a single cheap powder, about $2 a bag, to bring worn out soil back in a single season. The catch is that this powder is now restricted or banned from sale as a soil product in close to 30 states. The state agriculture departments will tell you it is a labeling issue. I tested the powder in my test bed against $40 of bagged amendment. The cheap powder won. Stay with me, because there is one pantry ingredient I mix in that doubles how fast it works. Let me tell you where this comes from, because the source matters. The powder is not new. It was standard farm advice for the better part of a century. I found the clearest write-up of it in a 1938 USDA Farmers Bulletin on reclaiming worn-out clay soils, the kind of plain government pamphlet they used to mail to any farmer who asked. That bulletin recommended something it called land plaster, spread at roughly 40 pounds per 1,000 square feet, to bring dead, compacted ground back to life. I went looking for it because of my own dirt. My native soil here is heavy clay loam, sitting at a pH of about 5.4 when I started, acidic, sticky, and packed down so hard the water would sheet right off the top. I had beds that drained like a parking lot. For years, I did what most gardeners do. I hauled in bagged amendment at $15 a bag, spring after spring, and watched it disappear into the clay with nothing to show for it by July. Some seasons, I just gave up on a bed entirely and planted somewhere else. That is the real cost here. Not a little inconvenience. Whole seasons lost. Money spent every single year on bags that never fixed the underlying problem. Yield you never got because the roots could not breathe. And the technique that was once handed out free by the USDA is now nearly impossible to buy as a labeled garden soil product. It was on every county agent's shelf 80 years ago. Today, you practically have to know the old name for it to find it at all. So here is what the powder actually is. It is agricultural gypsum, calcium sulfate. That is the very same mineral they grind up to make drywall and plaster of Paris, which is exactly why the old farmers called it land plaster. You walk into a farm supply store, the kind that sells feed and fence posts, and you can buy a 25 to 40 pound bag of it for right around $2. $2, not $2 a pound. $2 for the whole bag. It is a raw, mined mineral and nothing more. There is no brand stamped on it. There is no proprietary blend, no secret formula, no patented microbe package printed across the front of the sack. It is crushed rock in a plain paper bag, and it has been doing this same job since before your grandparents were born. And that right there is the first clue to why you will not find it sitting on the nice shelf at the garden centre next to the $15 bags with the glossy labels. There is no money in it. Nobody builds a marketing budget around a generic mineral that carries no margin. A company selling premium bagged amendment is not going to stock a $2 product that does the same work and hang a little sign over it, pointing customers away from their own shelf. So the cheapest, oldest, most proven structural fix for dead clay quietly became the one thing nobody bothers to carry under a name a gardener would recognize. All right, let us keep going, because the next question is the one that matters. How does a bag of crushed rock bring dead soil back? Here's the science, and I will translate it as I go. Clay soil is made of tiny, flat, negatively charged particles. When they pack together flat like a stack of wet playing cards sealed against each other, there is no space left between them for air or water or roots. That is compaction. That is the parking lot bed. Now, gypsum dissolves and releases calcium ions into the soil water. Those calcium ions go to work doing two things. They displace sodium that has been holding the clay tight, and they act like little bridges, pulling those flat clay particles together into rounded crumbs. Sodium does the opposite of calcium. It pushes the particles apart and keeps them dispersed and sealed, and a lot of tired old soil is carrying more of it than the gardener realizes. Calcium evicts it. The word for that crumbing up is flocculation. What I mean by flocculation is simply this. The particles clump into little crumb-like aggregates instead of lying flat and sealed. And the moment they crumb up, you get pore space between the crumbs. Pore space is where air lives, where water drains, where roots push through. You have physically rebuilt the structure of the soil. Here's the part that separates gypsum from lime, and it is the part most people miss. Lime also adds calcium, but lime raises pH. My soil already sits acidic at 5.4. I do not always want to push it higher, and if you overshoot pH, you create a whole new set of problems. Gypsum is pH neutral. It hands the soil calcium and fixes the structure without moving the pH at all. That chemistry is not a secret and it is not a trick. Any soil lab, any extension office, any chemistry textbook will confirm it. And that is exactly why the suppression never fully worked. You cannot unpublish basic chemistry. Now, I do not ask you to take chemistry on faith, and I do not take it on faith myself. I ran the comparison. I have a 4x8 test bed up by the deck that I use for exactly this. Side-by-side trials, same soil, same weather, same water. I split it down the middle. On one half, I spread about $2 worth of land plaster. On the other half, I worked in roughly $40 of premium bagged raised bed amendment. 3 $15 bags. The good stuff, the kind I used to buy every spring. Then I planted both halves the same and waited one season. And I wrote every bit of it down in the notebook, the same way I have for 22 years, because a result you did not record is just a story you tell yourself. I keep a screwdriver in the garage that I use as a cheap penetrometer. Before I started, I could push that screwdriver into either half of that bed, and it stopped dead at about 2 inches. Solid. After one season on the gypsum half, that same screwdriver sank in 8 inches with light hand pressure. 8 inches. The amendment half had improved, but not like that. The water told the same story. Before, I would pour a watering can on that clay, and it would pool on the surface for minutes before it went anywhere. After one season on the gypsum side, water soaked in within seconds. And then the carrots settled it for good. I grew a row straight across both halves. In the gypsum half, the carrots ran straight down, full length, clean. In the $40 amendment half, the same variety came up stunted and forked because the roots hit resistance and split. $2 matched and beat 40. That is not the result the people selling the $40 bags want sitting in a test bed where anybody can repeat it. Here is the part that surprised even me. Most gardeners, when they hit compacted soil, reach for one of two things. They pile on compost or they throw down lime. And both have a problem. Compost is wonderful. I use it everywhere. But compost rebuilds structure slowly through biology over years. If your bed is dead right now, compost is a long-term project, not a one-season fix. Lime, like I said, moves your pH. And on already acidic clay, that is a gamble you do not need to take. Gypsum does something neither one does. It restructures the soil physically in a single season by changing how the clay particles bond. You open the soil up first, mechanically, and then the biology, the worms, the roots, the microbes, moves into the space you just created. The structure comes first, and the life follows. On top of that, you are feeding the plants calcium and sulfur, two nutrients a lot of gardens are quietly short on, and you're doing it without a pH swing in either direction. Calcium for cell walls and fruit, sulfur for proteins, and that deep green colour. A structural fix and a nutrition bump in the same $2 bag. You can see why this was standard advice once, and you can see why a product with no brand and no margin is exactly the kind of thing that slips off the shelf and out of the standard advice. Now, before we get into why this got buried, I want to point you somewhere. Everything I just walked you through. The calcium chemistry, the pH question, fixing structure without wrecking your soil balance. That is the heart of Chapter 3 of my book, Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. That chapter is called Soil Reset, the Chemistry of Fertility, and it lays out pH adjustment, the calcium and micronutrients that actually limit your yield, and my specific raised bed soil recipe, with diagrams showing nutrient availability at each pH level. It is $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your television, grab your phone right now and point it at the QR code on the screen. Take your time finding it. I will wait. If you're on a phone or laptop already, the link is right down in the description. All right, so why is something this cheap and this proven restricted or banned as a soil product in close to 30 states? The state agriculture departments will tell you it is a labelling issue. And here is the honest truth. They are technically right. It is a labelling issue. That is exactly the problem. After 1947, the states began adopting a uniform model law written through an outfit called AAPFCO that governs how anything sold as a soil amendment has to be labelled. Under those laws, if you want to sell a product as a soil amendment, you have to register it with the State Agriculture Department, pay the registration fees, and print a guaranteed analysis label with claims you can substantiate. Every state, separately. Now think about who can afford to do that. A company with a $15 branded bag can spread that registration cost across thousands of sales. But raw agricultural gypsum is a generic mineral. There is no brand behind it, no company collecting margin to fund a registration in 30 different states. So it cannot legally sit on the consumer soil product shelf. It gets sold only as a farm or industrial product, or it gets pulled entirely. I will be fair about this. Those labelling laws exist for a real reason and to stop hucksters from selling worthless dirt with miracle claims on the bag. That is a legitimate goal. But look at the effect. The oldest, cheapest, most proven structural amendment we have became the single hardest one to buy as a garden product, while the expensive branded bags stayed right where they were. Every spring you spent $40 on amendment or gave up on a bed that would not drain, you were paying for the fact that the $2 answer got quietly moved off the shelf. Now, stay with me, because I promised you one more thing. The pantry ingredient that doubles how fast the gypsum works. It is unsulfured blackstrap molasses, the same jar you might have in the cupboard for baking. Here is what I do. About a quarter cup of molasses per gallon of water, stirred until it dissolves, and I water that right in over the gypsum after I spread it. And here is the science behind it, in plain terms. The gypsum loosens the clay particles, but it is soil bacteria that lock them into place. Those bacteria produce sticky compounds, polysaccharides, which is just a fancy word for the sugary glues they secrete, and those glues bind the loosened particles into stable little aggregates. The molasses is simple sugar. It is food. You feed the bacteria multiply, and they produce more of that glue faster. I ran it side by side, gypsum alone on one section, gypsum plus the molasses water on the other. The molasses half showed visible crumb structure in about 4 weeks. The gypsum alone half took closer to 8. Now, conditions vary, and your soil biology might be at a different starting point than mine, so test it. But that little trick never made it onto any bagged product label because the cheapest solutions almost always turn out to be the oldest ones. All right, before I let you go, now you have the answer that got pulled off the shelf. But the only reason I could prove a $2 mineral beat a $40 bag is that I measured it and wrote it down. That is Chapter 2 of the book, The Measurement Foundation. It lays out the exact record-keeping system I use, what to measure and how, with the diagrams that show every measurement point. If you're done guessing and ready to start measuring, that is where to begin. The whole thing is 115 pages, $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're on the television, take a moment now, grab your phone and scan the QR code on the screen. No rush, I will be right here. On a phone or laptop, the link is in the description. So that is it. A $2 bag of gypsum restructured dead compacted clay in a single season where $40 of bagged amendment could not. And now you have the answer that got quietly moved off the garden shelf. Your soil is different than mine, so test it on one bed before you commit the whole garden. Next time I will show you another old soil trick the bagged product folks would rather you never relearned. I will see you in the next one.